At my niece's wedding, the girl I raised, fed and loved like my own, I wasn't seated with the family. I wasn't mentioned in the speech. I was asked to move so the photographer could get just the real relatives. Then my sister raised her glass and said, "To my mother, the only woman who's ever stood by me." I didn't cry. I didn't walk out. I stayed long enough to hear the applause. And then I quietly opened the envelope in my purse. My father's will, my name, my revenge, written, signed, and about to be read. I was born in the middle, not just in birth order, but in life. Vanessa, my older sister, arrived first with golden curls and a voice like sugar. She could do no wrong. My mother, Margaret, would dress her in matching clothes and whisper loud enough for me to hear, "She's going to be someone." Then came me, Rachel, quieter, darker-haired, more cautious. "She's independent," my mother said once at a family party, like that was both a compliment and an excuse. Matthew came last, our baby brother, the boy. My father, a quiet man with hands like cracked leather and eyes that always softened when they looked at me, adored him, and he adored me too, in a quieter way, through weekend woodshop projects and slipping me extra toast when no one was looking. But in our house, praise was rationed, and I was always just fine. "Rachel's okay," my mother would say. "She gets by." At school, I learned to shrink. If I got an A, Vanessa had gotten an A+ 3 years earlier in the same class. If I won an art contest, Matthew had scored twice that in math. At family dinners, stories were told about Vanessa's achievements and Matthew's potential, while I helped refill water glasses and cleared plates in silence. My father noticed. Sometimes late at night he'd find me sketching at the kitchen table and say, "Don't let them write your story, Rach. You're the best of all of us. You just haven't been loud enough yet." But then one winter when I was 15, he collapsed in the driveway. Heart attack. Quick. Unforgiving. His death left behind silence, bills, and a house full of sharp edges. I thought it might bring us closer, that without him we'd need each other more. But instead, the distance grew. My mother became colder, like grief had frozen something inside her. She leaned on Vanessa for decisions and Matthew for hope. I was left to fill gaps no one acknowledged, drive grandma to appointments, pick up groceries, fix broken things. No one asked me to. No one thanked me. One evening, 2 years after Dad's funeral, I heard them talking in the kitchen. Vanessa was home from college and said, "We should sell the house once Matt graduates. It's too big." My mother replied, "Of course. Rachel won't need it. She's adaptable." I didn't speak up. I never did. I just folded the laundry and told myself that being useful was its own kind of love. When Vanessa had Emily, things changed, or at least I hoped they would. She was overwhelmed, unprepared, and moved back home just for a few months. Those months turned into years. My mother couldn't handle a baby, and Vanessa always had some meeting, some crisis, so I stepped in. I changed the diapers, I stayed up through fevers, I taught Emily how to read. And for a while, when she'd cling to my leg and call me Mama Shell, I let myself believe I was finally seen. But then one night, I overheard Vanessa on the phone. "Yes, Mom's been incredible with Emily," she said. "I don't know how I could have done this without her." Mum, not me. I stood in the hallway, clutching Emily's tiny socks in my fist, and realised something. I was always close enough to help, but never close enough to count. And I still stayed. Emily started school when she was 5. Vanessa had taken a new job in the city by then and moved into a condo with someone she called serious but not forever. My mother's arthritis had gotten worse, so the morning routines, packing lunch, brushing tangled curls, double knotting tiny sneakers, all fell to me. I didn't complain. I liked it. I liked waking up early to the sound of Emily humming in the bathroom, or how she'd reach for my hand as we crossed the street. It gave my days rhythm, purpose. At parent-teacher conferences, the staff would nod toward me and say, "Emily's doing great. She clearly has a solid support system at home." I would smile, say thank you, and pretend that the word aunt wasn't something I had to constantly re-explain. But the older Emily got, the more she began to understand the hierarchy of our family. At 8, she started correcting people when they called me her mum. "She's just my aunt," she'd say with a laugh. At 10, she asked why my name wasn't on any of the school forms. "Is it because you're not like real family?" she said, with no malice, just curiosity. Vanessa came home less and less. When she did show up, she'd sweep in with new toys, take Emily out for overpriced frozen yogurt, and post pictures captioned, "Girls' Day with my baby girl." The comments would flood in. "You're such an amazing mum. Emily is lucky to have you." She never corrected them. I tried to stay gracious. I told myself I wasn't in this for credit. I was in this for Emily. But it chipped away at me, slowly. One evening, Emily brought home a school assignment, "Write about your family hero." I didn't expect her to write about me. By then, I had learned better. But when I read the line, "My mum raised me all by herself while working hard at her job and still having time to make cupcakes," something inside me folded. I baked those cupcakes. Still, I helped her print the essay. I even corrected the grammar. When Emily turned 16, Vanessa returned with big plans. "She needs to learn responsibility," she said. "Maybe spend weekends at my place. Build a relationship." Relationship. Like the 16 years I spent loving her didn't count. Emily didn't fight it. In fact, she seemed excited. A new bedroom, a new laptop, a new version of the mother she had always wanted. My mother supported it too. "Let Vanessa be a parent now," she said. "You've done enough, Rachel. Don't be greedy." Greedy? For what? For wanting the child I raised to remember I existed? They moved Emily's things in boxes. Vanessa redecorated the old bedroom, turned it into a guest room. My mother said, "Maybe now you can finally rest." But I didn't rest. I waited for a call, a text, even a postcard. Weeks passed, then months, then the wedding invitation came. Emily was getting married. I stared at the envelope like it might rewrite itself. Inside, the card was thick, cream-coloured, formal. It read, "You are cordially invited to the wedding of Emily Monroe and Caleb Grant. Venue, Foxwood Hall. Date, May 12th. Guest, Rachel Monroe. No aunt, no title, just a name, a placeholder." I thought about not going. I thought about sending a gift and nothing more. But then I remembered something my father used to say. The people who try to write you out are the ones most afraid of what you might say. So I RSVP'd yes. The wedding was just 2 weeks away when Vanessa called. I hadn't heard her voice in nearly a year. "Hey," she said, as if we'd spoken yesterday. "We need help with some last-minute prep for the reception. You're good with that kind of thing, right?" "That kind of thing." I bit my tongue. "Sure," I said. "What do you need?" There was a pause, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. "Just a few table assignments, floral deliveries, and making sure Grandma takes her meds. Simple stuff." The job of a quiet ghost. Still, I showed up at Foxwood Hall the next morning. The venue was gorgeous, vaulted ceilings, white roses draped like waterfalls, gold-rimmed china. The coordinator mistook me for a vendor and asked me to unload a crate of glassware. I didn't correct her. Maybe I was a vendor. A lifetime vendor of other people's joy. Inside, Vanessa was giving orders in her signature stilettos and tailored cream pantsuit. "Move the dessert table," she barked. "The lighting washes Emily out." I stood by the corner until she finally noticed me. "Oh, good," she said. "Can you get Mum's seat adjusted? Her back's been acting up again. And maybe check the place cards too. Someone misspelled Grandma's name." Not a word about my dress, my hair, my existence. As I walked past the seating chart, I noticed the layout, a long rectangular table at the front labelled Family. Under it, names were listed: Margaret, Vanessa, Emily, Matthew, Caleb's parents. No Rachel. I scanned the guest list and found my name, table 16, by the kitchen. I told myself not to cry. I told myself it didn't matter. But my hand trembled as I adjusted the silverware, as I set flowers into centerpieces that would never be photographed with me in the frame. That night I went home to the house I had lived in all my life, the one my father had built with his own hands, the one I had kept together after he died, the one that now had a leaky roof and a cracked driveway because no one had offered to help fix it, not Vanessa, not Matthew, not our mother. I pulled out a box of photos from the closet, Emily's birthdays, first school play, middle school graduation. In every picture I was just outside the frame, holding the cake, holding her coat, holding everything up. The next morning a thick envelope arrived. It was from a law firm. I opened it with shaking hands, half expecting some lawsuit, some legal erasure, but inside was a letter, typed, stamped, signed. To my daughter Rachel, I've asked Mr. Klein to deliver this in the spring of 2023, assuming I'm no longer here. If you're reading this, it means I've failed to protect you in life the way I wanted to. So let me try now, in death. Enclosed is a separate document, my final will, the true one, the one your mother never saw. You were always my centre, even when they tried to spin you out. The house is yours, the savings are yours, the family name is yours to restore or let go of entirely. But most of all, you mattered, Rachel, you always did. Love, Dad. I pressed the pages to my chest, sat on the floor, and cried for the first time in years, not because I had been forgotten, but because someone had remembered. I brought the letter and the sealed will to Mr. Klein's office the next morning. The man was as meticulous as I remembered. Grey suit, matching tie pin, fingers always steepled in thought. He glanced over the documents and nodded. Yes, this is the real one, he said. It was notarized in 2019. Your father made it clear this was to remain sealed until your niece's wedding, or until your mother passed, whichever came first. He knew, I whispered. He knew they'd never include me, mister. Klein looked at me, softer now. He didn't want you to fight for what was already yours. He wanted you to have it when you needed it most. The terms of the will were simple. The family house, ours since my great-grandfather, was transferred solely to me. The savings, modest but meaningful, would come my way after legal notice was served. There was even a handwritten postscript from my father, attached to a Polaroid of me holding Emily when she was a baby. You built this family in ways no one saw. Let the truth stand, even if they never do. I walked out of that office clutching not just papers, but something heavier. Proof, a record, a rebuttal to every dismissal, every invisible label they had tried to brand me with. Still, I didn't know what to do with it yet. Part of me wanted to photocopy the will and mail it to every relative. Part of me wanted to frame it. But instead, I folded it into my purse and went back to Foxwood Hall. Rehearsal dinner. Everyone was there, laughing, dressed in their picture-perfect outfits. Vanessa in red silk, Emily glowing in white, our mother on a cane but still commanding attention with her silver hair pinned high like royalty. I kept to the corner, like always, watched, waited. During the toast, Vanessa stood and tapped her glass. I want to thank the women who made me who I am today, she said. My mother, who taught me how to lead, and my daughter, who taught me how to love. Applause. And of course, she added, glancing my way for the first time all night, thank you to Rachel for always helping, for being there in ways that didn't go unnoticed. Didn't go unnoticed. The lie was so casual, so polished, it landed like a slap. Emily smiled and nodded, but said nothing. Later that night, as I was getting ready to leave, our mother caught me by the arm. Don't ruin this, she said, eyes hard. You've always been good at staying quiet. Keep it that way. I nodded, because I had learnt long ago that speaking up in front of them was like screaming into a vacuum. But this time, I wasn't walking away empty-handed. I had something they didn't know I held. The next morning, I met again with Mr. Klein. Let's do it, I told him. He filed the notice with the county clerk. In 48 hours, my name would legally and publicly be the sole owner of the Monroe family estate. Let them make their speeches, let them take their photos, let them pretend history was what they said it was, because now, for the first time in my life, I had something they couldn't take back, a legacy in ink, in blood, in truth. The morning of the wedding was warm, the kind of May Day that looked perfect in photos but clung to your skin like quiet nerves. I arrived early, dressed in navy, modest heels, hair pinned the way my father used to like it, simple, no nonsense. I parked in the far lot, away from the valet circle, because no one had thought to include me on the preferred guest list. Inside, the venue was alive with energy. White roses hung from arches, glass orbs filled with tea lights dangled above the aisle, and violinists rehearsed in the distance. I walked past the seating board again just to be sure. My name hadn't moved, still at table 16. Still between two acquaintances from Caleb's side, strangers to me, placeholders in my life just as I was in theirs. I found my seat, placed my gift on the designated table, an embroidered quilt I had spent months stitching, every square a memory of Emily's childhood. The gift tag simply read, "To Emily, with love, always." I didn't sign it Aunt Rachel. I wasn't sure the title was mine anymore. People buzzed around in dresses and cologne, laughter and champagne. I stayed at the edge, watching, waiting. I didn't want to cause a scene. I didn't want attention. But I did want to witness it, this moment they'd all been planning so carefully, this story they'd written without me. Emily walked down the aisle on Vanessa's arm, not Caleb's, not her father's, but her mother's. I hadn't expected to be asked, but I also hadn't expected it to sting this much. Vanessa looked proud, glowing. The guests clapped as they reached the front. Emily didn't glance back, not once. The ceremony was poetic, scripted to perfection, readings from Corinthians, gentle humour from the officiant. And then the moment arrived, the part I hadn't prepared for. The officiant said, "Before we proceed with the vows, the bride would like to take a moment to honour the women who shaped her." I froze. Emily turned to the crowd. "My mother has been my compass, my rock, my light. And my grandmother, her grace, her wisdom, her strength, is in every step I take." No mention of me, no pause, just silence, and then applause. It was as if I didn't exist. Not even a nod in my direction, not even a thank you to everyone else, just a clean, clinical erasure. I looked around, no one noticed, no one looked for me, and in that moment I understood something brutal and clear. They hadn't just written me out. They had practiced the lines so often, they believed the version without me. After the ceremony, I walked outside to breathe. I sat on a stone bench near the garden, hidden behind a willow tree. The air smelled like lilac and old grief. My fingers trembled, but not with anger. Something else. Sadness. Acceptance. Maybe both. Then I heard a voice. "You look like the mother." I turned. An elderly man in a bow tie, holding a vintage camera, stood nearby. "I've been photographing weddings for 50 years, he said. "You learn to see who matters, even when they're not centre stage." I smiled faintly. "That's kind of you." He nodded. "Want me to take one for you? Just you, just this moment." I nodded. He lifted his lens, snapped the photo. Just me, sitting quietly on a bench outside the wedding of the girl I had raised. A ghost in daylight, still standing. I stayed outside longer than I should have, watching the sun dip lower behind the hedges, casting shadows over the marble path that led back into the hall. The music inside shifted from orchestral to jazzy, a cue that dinner had begun. I hadn't planned to eat. I hadn't planned for anything, really, but I forced myself to stand and walk back in. Ghost or not, I had a seat. Table 16 was tucked between the bar and the hallway to the restrooms. The floral centerpiece was half wilted, and the white tablecloth had a faint lipstick stain near my place setting. The two guests beside me were distant cousins of Caleb's, engaged in a heated debate about cryptocurrency. They barely acknowledged me. Dinner was served in rounds: braised beef, asparagus bundles, scalloped potatoes. The food was elegant, beautifully plated, and completely tasteless to me. I ate mechanically, nodded politely, sipped the sparkling water I'd requested in lieu of champagne. Then came the speeches. Vanessa stood again, mic in hand. "I know we've already said our vows and shed our tears," she began, "but I'd be remiss not to take a moment to honour the two most important women in Emily's life." A pause, a glance toward her left where my mother sat, regal in a navy suit, hands folded. "My mother," Vanessa continued, "whose strength and sacrifice are unmatched, and—" she turned toward Emily, "the woman who raised you with a love that never faltered, even when life made it difficult. Thank you, Mum, for being Emily's true north." They embraced. The room clapped. Some stood. My fork trembled in my hand. I lowered it, wiped my mouth slowly with the linen napkin, and stood. Not abruptly, not to make a scene. I simply walked toward the gift table. The quilt I had made was still there, untouched. No one had opened it during the reception. Most gifts had already been moved out to a back room by staff. Mine was left behind, overlooked, like a box someone assumed belonged to the caterers. I reached for it. "Miss," one of the younger attendants asked, hesitating as I lifted the box, "are you taking that?" I met her eyes. "Yes, I am." Because it was mine. I walked out the side exit, box in hand, and made my way back to the car. The sun had nearly set, painting the sky with the same dusty blue and amber hues I remembered from the day I first held Emily in the hospital. She had wrapped her tiny fingers around mine and wouldn't let go. That memory wasn't in a frame. It wasn't part of a speech. But it lived in me. I placed the quilt gently in the back seat, started the car, and drove home in silence. The roads were empty, save for a few flickering headlights and a couple holding hands on the sidewalk, laughing like the world had never broken their hearts. When I reached the house, I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the fireplace, lit a match, and set a fire. Then I unfolded the quilt, laid it out across the couch, and ran my hand over every square, each one stitched with something Emily had loved. Her stuffed giraffe, her first ballet shoes, the tree she used to climb in the backyard, my work, my memories, my proof. I didn't cry. I just sat in the quiet, let the warmth of the fire press against my skin, and thought, this is what it feels like to disappear while still being alive. And then, somewhere deep in the silence, a new feeling stirred. Not anger, not grief, something colder, sharper, clarity. They had made their choice, and now I would make mine. The next morning I woke to sunlight slanting across the floor, dust motes spinning in the air like secrets. I hadn't slept well. My dreams were full of voices, Vanessa's smooth dismissals, Emily's laugh when she used to call me Mama Shell, my mother's sharp whisper, "Don't ruin this." But beneath them all, steady and clear, was my father's voice. "You mattered, Rachel. You always did." I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the quilt now folded neatly beside me. My hands traced the edge of my father's will, still in its original envelope, edges worn from where I'd clutched it the night before. I didn't know what the fallout would be once the document became public. My mother would claim I forged it. Vanessa would rage. Emily might never speak to me again. But for once, I didn't care about their version of the story, because this was mine. I called Mr. Klein. "I'm ready," I said. He didn't ask for clarification. "Then we proceed," he replied. By noon, he had filed a petition with the probate court to honour the amended will. Because it had been legally witnessed and time-stamped, the court was obligated to review it formally. In 2 weeks there would be a hearing. And everything I had spent my life being denied, recognition, belonging, my father's home, would stand before them in black and white. I spent the next few days in a strange state of quiet. There were no calls from Vanessa, no texts from Emily. I didn't expect any. Maybe word hadn't reached them yet, or maybe they believed I would slink away like always. Silent, compliant. But the silence held a different weight now. It wasn't avoidance, it was preparation. The night before the hearing, I went up to the attic. The air was thick with the smell of cedar and dust, old suitcases and forgotten boxes stacked like the layers of my life. In the corner was a trunk I hadn't opened in years, my father's. I unlatched it, the hinges creaking. Inside were pieces of him, a flannel shirt still faintly holding his scent, a pocket knife, a faded photo of him and me fishing at Lake Irwin when I was 9. Tucked in the side, carefully wrapped in tissue, was a wood carving, an unfinished sculpture of a tree. The base was marked, "For Rachel. Your roots run deeper than they know." My throat tightened. That carving had sat on his workbench for years. I'd thought he never finished it, but he had, just never given it to me. I brought it downstairs and placed it on the mantel above the fireplace. No plaques, no grand displays, just there, like it always belonged. The morning of the hearing, I dressed in black slacks and a cream blouse, minimal makeup, a steady braid down my back. Not because I wanted to impress anyone, but because I wanted to walk in as the woman my father raised me to be. Mr. Klein met me at the courthouse. The building smelled of old paper and waxed floors, of battles fought silently behind closed doors. We entered the courtroom just before 10. My mother and Vanessa were already there. Vanessa wore a navy dress, her lips tight. My mother sat rigid beside her, hands clutching her purse as if it were the only anchor left. Emily wasn't there. Good, I thought. She shouldn't have to watch what comes next. The judge, a silver-haired woman with kind but unreadable eyes, called the hearing to order. Mr. Klein stood, presented the documents, and began. I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The truth was already speaking for me. The courtroom was silent, except for the steady rustling of documents and the occasional click of a pen. Mr. Klein laid out the facts with surgical precision. Dates, signatures, video records, and a notarized statement verifying the authenticity of my father's second will. There were no loopholes, no ambiguity. The law, this time, was on my side. When the judge asked if the family had any objections, Vanessa shot to her feet. "This is absurd," she snapped, her voice tight. "That document wasn't part of the estate file. My mother was executor. If there was another will, why wouldn't she have seen it?" Mr. Klein didn't flinch. "Because Mr. Monroe delivered it to me directly, under strict instruction. He was aware of potential familial interference." Interference. A soft word for betrayal. Vanessa looked to our mother for backup. Margaret didn't rise. She didn't speak. Her lips remained pressed together like she was holding back a storm. I half expected her to call me a liar, to accuse me of forging everything, but instead she sat there silent, staring at her hands. The judge reviewed the final item, a video file recorded by my father just weeks before his passing. On the screen he looked older than I remembered, his face leaner, but his eyes just as clear. "If you're watching this," he began, "I'm gone. And if the people in that room are who I think they are, I owe it to Rachel to speak for her one last time." He paused, smiled gently. She was always the quiet one, not because she had nothing to say, but because she was always listening, always giving, always cleaning up the messes left by others. If love was measured in effort, Rachel gave more to this family than any of us. My hands trembled in my lap. She never asked for much, but I'm giving her what I can. The house, the savings, the story she was written out of. Let her name be written in, this time, where it always belonged. The video ended. Silence fell again, heavier now. The judge folded her hands. "The will is valid," she said. "It supersedes all previous documentation. Effective immediately, all assets listed shall be transferred to Ms. Rachel Monroe." Vanessa muttered something under her breath and stormed out. heels clacking like gunfire across the courtroom floor. My mother remained seated, frozen. I didn't look back at either of them. After the hearing, I stepped outside into the warm afternoon light. The courthouse steps felt taller than they had that morning, but my feet moved easier. Each step was a release, a quiet reclaiming. Mr. Klein walked beside me. "Congratulations," he said. I shook my head. This wasn't a victory, just recognition. He nodded thoughtfully. That's what most people are fighting for in courtrooms like these. Not power, not money, just the truth, finally being louder than the lie. When I arrived home, the house looked different, not in its structure, but in its meaning. For the first time in decades, I wasn't just the caretaker. I was the heir, the rightful daughter, the one my father trusted with the family legacy. Inside, I made tea and sat in the living room, quilt folded neatly beside the tree carving. The photo of my father and me fishing now sat in a simple frame by the window. I stared at it for a long time, wondering if he somehow knew this moment would come. Later that evening, as the sun slipped behind the trees, a car pulled into the driveway. I stood cautiously, peeking through the curtain. It was Vanessa. She stepped out, holding something in her arms, a white box, her expression unreadable. I didn't move, didn't open the door. A minute passed. She placed the box on the doorstep, rang the bell once, then walked back to her car and drove away. I waited until her taillights disappeared before opening the door. Inside the box was the quilt, unwrapped, no note, just returned, as if that made it right. I folded it again, slower this time, no longer out of heartbreak, but because I understood now. Some things are too full of memory to be given away, even to those who shared them. They belonged here, with me. The news travelled faster than I expected. Within 48 hours of the court's ruling, the family group chats buzzed, ones I had been quietly removed from years ago. Extended cousins messaged in vague tones of surprise and faux warmth. "Heard about the hearing? Wow. Congrats, I think. If you ever want to catch up, let's do coffee soon." I didn't respond to any of them. The house, once a place of service and silence, now felt like mine. But ownership came with weight. Every room whispered memories, most of them half buried. The wall in the hallway still bore faint pencil lines from when I charted Emily's growth. The pantry door squeaked exactly as it had when I used to sneak in after midnight to cry with a spoonful of peanut butter. The den still held the indents of my father's boots in the carpet. That Saturday I received a letter from my mother. Not a call, not a visit. A letter. It was written on her signature ivory stationery, the one she reserved for sympathy cards and formal complaints. "Rachel, what you've done is cruel. Your father was confused near the end, easily manipulated. I should have contested that will, but I didn't want to drag the family into scandal. What you think you've won is just brick and wood. It doesn't buy you respect. It doesn't make you family. You will always be the girl who didn't know her place. Margaret." I folded the letter once, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the fireplace. I didn't need to read it again. I had memorised that tone by age 10. But what caught me off guard was what happened next. Emily called. It was 3 days after the ruling. Her name lit up my phone like a warning. My thumb hovered over the screen before I finally answered. "Rachel?" Her voice was soft, hesitant. "Yes. I heard about the will. Grandma's really upset." "I imagine she is." A long pause. "I didn't know about any of it," she said. I didn't say anything. What could I say? "She said you forged it, but I don't think you did." That surprised me. I sat down on the edge of the couch. "Why not?" "Because of the carving." I blinked. "What carving?" "The tree one, the one Grandpa made. I remember seeing it in the attic when I was little. He told me it was for you." I looked across the room at it now, centred on the mantel, a quiet witness. "I didn't know how much he loved you," she said, and her voice cracked. I thought I thought you were just always around because you didn't have anywhere else to be. A pause. I didn't know you chose me. I closed my eyes. I'm sorry, Rachel. Those 4 words, not enough to rewrite history, not enough to undo the empty speeches or the erased titles, but still, enough to crack something open. Thank you for saying that, I replied, and meant it. I don't know what happens next, she said. Neither do I answered, but I know this house is mine now, and you'll always have a place here if you want it. She didn't respond right away, but I could hear her crying softly. When we hung up, I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel powerful. What I felt was something smaller, quieter, peace. That night, I walked through each room with a journal, writing down memories as they came. Not to hold on to them, but to let them breathe. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving the past. I was writing the future. 2 days after Emily's call, I received an email from a local journalist. The subject line read, Monroe Family Estate Dispute, Public Interest Story. My stomach clenched. I clicked it open, expecting sensationalism, maybe even slander. But the tone was surprisingly respectful. Ms. Monroe, we've recently reviewed the probate court's filings and were moved by the final will your father recorded. We believe your story, one of legacy, erasure and long overdue acknowledgement, could resonate with many. If you're willing to share your experience, we'd be honoured to feature you. Respectfully, Gillian Parker, Fox Hollow Gazette. I read it 3 times before closing the laptop. The irony wasn't lost on me. All my life, no one wanted to hear what I had to say. Now, the world suddenly cared. But did I want to tell them? Later that evening, as the house settled into its usual quiet, I stood in the doorway of my old bedroom, the one I'd never redecorated after high school. The wallpaper still bore faded outlines of old posters. On the dresser sat a dusty ceramic cat Emily had made for me in 3rd grade, painted unevenly in purple and gold. I hadn't had the heart to throw it away. I sat down on the edge of the bed and opened the notebook where I'd been journaling. The last few entries were stiff, factual, documentation, more than reflection. So this time, I wrote like I was talking to my father. You were right, I wrote. They tried to spin me out, but you gave me roots. I didn't respond to the journalist that night. Instead, I took a walk through the backyard. The grass was overgrown, the rose bushes tangled and wild. I used to prune them every Sunday before church, back when I still believed routine could earn me recognition. At the far end of the yard stood the treehouse my father had built. It had been off limits after his death, too sacred, too fragile. But something pulled me toward it now. I climbed the creaky wooden ladder slowly, bracing myself for rot. To my surprise, the structure held. Inside, the space smelled like cedar and rain. The old sleeping bag was still tucked in the corner, along with a rusted flashlight and a worn-out deck of cards. I sat on the wooden floor, closed my eyes, and let the silence hold me. It wasn't that I needed the world to see me now, I needed to see myself. When I came back inside, the answering machine was blinking. I didn't recognize the number, but the message was unmistakable. It was Vanessa. Rachel, her voice said, taut, clipped. Mom is furious. She says you've humiliated her. That the neighbours are talking. I don't care about the inheritance anymore, okay? Keep the damn house. But don't you dare go talking to reporters. Don't make this uglier than it already is. Click. No apology, no self-reflection, just fear of exposure. I stared at the machine for a long moment before deleting the message. The next morning I replied to Gillian Parker's email. Thank you for reaching out. I'd be willing to talk, not for revenge, but for the women like me who have spent their lives being erased. If you're telling a story, let's tell the true one. We arranged to meet at the house that Friday. When she arrived, she was younger than I expected, with a recorder in one hand and a notepad in the other. But she didn't rush. She sat on the same couch where I'd spent so many nights crying, and she listened. I told her about my father, about the will, about the wedding, and about the quiet kind of love that never gets thanked, only expected. When she left, she said, "I think people are going to see you, really see you for the first time." I nodded, unsure if that even mattered anymore. But a week later, when the story published, something shifted. Strangers wrote in, emails, letters, messages. "I'm a Rachel too," one said. "My mother treated me like wallpaper," another wrote. "Thank you for speaking. Not fame, not fanfare, just truth. And for the first time in my life, that was enough." The article went live on a Wednesday. I didn't even know it had published until the mail started arriving. Not bills or advertisements, real letters, handwritten, folded carefully into envelopes bearing return addresses from places I'd never been: Des Moines, Tallahassee, Boise, Santa Fe. Women wrote to me. Women in their 50s, 60s, even 70s. Some said they'd raised nieces, grandkids, or siblings' children. Others had taken care of their parents for years, only to be shut out of the will or pushed into the background once the funeral ended. One letter had no return address, just a note. "You gave me the words to name what they stole. I kept them all, every letter, stacked them neatly in an old cookie tin I'd repurposed just for that." My father would have smiled. He always believed in repurposing things. "Make the old useful," he used to say. "That's how you honour what came before." One morning, as I was sorting through the tin, the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Emily stood there. She looked nervous. Her eyes darted past me into the hallway as if searching for something familiar. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She walked slowly, looking around the house. "It hasn't changed," she murmured. "Even the smell." I didn't say anything. I let her take it in. The framed photo of me and my father on the mantel. The quilt folded over the armrest, the wooden carving above the fireplace. Finally, she turned to face me. "I read the article," she said. "I didn't know all of it. What you went through, what you gave." "I didn't write it for you," I said gently. "I know." She hesitated. But I needed to hear it anyway. We sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where I'd once helped her with math homework, where we used to eat cereal and play memory games on school mornings. "I used to think love was loud," she said, "like Mom's voice, like applause. But now I wonder if I mistook volume for value." Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry, Rachel." This time she didn't cry for herself. She cried for me, for the silence I had swallowed, for the rooms I had cleaned, for the memories she had edited. And I forgave her. Not because she asked the right way, not because the apology fixed the past, but because love, real love, doesn't always wait for perfect words. "I kept this for you," I said, rising and walking to the bookshelf. I pulled out a scrapbook, heavy with pages. Inside were photos of her birthdays, ticket stubs from school plays, notes she'd scribbled on napkins and stuck to the fridge. "You're the best, Aunt Shell. I love you 100 hearts." She flipped through it slowly, her tears dropping onto the plastic sleeves. "I forgot all of this," she whispered. "No," I said. "You just weren't ready to remember." She stayed for hours. We didn't rehash every detail. We didn't analyse the damage. We just sat in the rooms we once shared, the quiet now filled with something else. Recognition. Before she left, she stood in the doorway and looked at me like she had when she was 5 and didn't want to go to preschool. "Can I come back?" she asked. "Any time," I said. "This will always be home." And in that moment the story shifted, not into a fairy tale, not into some miracle reconciliation, but into something more honest. A legacy written not just in silence but in survival, in still showing up, in not letting go. Emily came back the next Sunday, this time with old photo albums in her arms. Ones I hadn't seen in years. Some I'd assumed were lost or tossed out during one of Vanessa's many spring cleanings. She set them on the coffee table gently, like artifacts. We sat cross-legged on the floor, flipping through the pages as if piecing together an ancient story. There we were, Emily in pigtails, me in worn jeans, smiling as we planted tomatoes in the backyard. Emily in a princess costume, me hot gluing sequins to her sash at midnight. Birthday cakes, pillow forts, flu season cuddles, all the invisible labour of love, now made visible. You were always there, she murmured. I know, I said, even when you didn't. She turned a page and pointed to a blurry photo. That's when I broke my arm, I nodded. You fell off the swing. Your mum was out of town. I remember waking up in the hospital. You were holding my hand. You'd drawn a heart on the cast. She looked at me, really looked. I don't think I ever said thank you. You were 7. I'm 27 now. That made me laugh. Well then, you're 30 years overdue. She grinned, and for the first time in years, it wasn't forced. That afternoon, we cooked together, chopped vegetables, rolled dough. It wasn't like it used to be. We weren't trying to recapture something lost. We were building something new. After dinner, she asked if she could sleep over. Just for tonight, she said. I don't want to go back yet. I gave her fresh sheets, turned down the bed in the room that used to be hers. I watched her curl up, quilt pulled to her chin, the same way she had when she was small and afraid of thunderstorms. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the backyard. The tree house loomed in the distance, still standing. In the quiet, I thought of my father, of the carving he left, of the words in his will. He hadn't needed to be loud to be heard. He just needed someone to keep his legacy alive. I thought of Vanessa, her silence since her voicemail, her refusal to acknowledge what had been decided, and Margaret, who hadn't spoken to me since the hearing. Their absence no longer stung. It just confirmed what had always been true. Some people only love you when they think you owe them. But not Emily, not anymore. The next morning she made pancakes, a bit burnt, overly syrupy, but she beamed as she placed the plate in front of me. I want to keep coming back, she said. I want this to be part of my life again. You don't have to prove anything to me, I said softly. I know, but I want to, for myself. That day we went through the attic. She found her old sketchbooks, a doll missing half its hair, a pair of ballet shoes still dusted with glitter. She held them like sacred things, not just relics of childhood, but pieces of us. In the back corner of the attic was a box labelled Rachel. She opened it slowly. Inside were letters my father had written, but never sent. Birthday cards he had bought in advance. One for every year I'd missed a real celebration, some still sealed, dated in pencil. One said, "For Rachel when she turns 50. Her fingers brushed over the envelope. I didn't know he loved you like this. He didn't show it like most people do, I said, but he made it known in the end. Emily looked up at me. You've been the heart of this family all along. We just refused to see it. That night, after she left, I returned to the attic and carefully placed the box back where she'd found it. Not to forget, but to preserve. Not all wounds scar the skin. Some heal invisibly, one quiet day at a time. The world didn't change overnight. The neighbours still whispered. Old friends didn't call, but I no longer needed them to. The house, once filled with echoes of being overlooked, now echoed with the gentle rustle of restoration. And I, for the first time, wasn't just holding space for others. I was living in it. Fall settled into Fox Hollow like a slow exhale, leaves curling into gold, the sky deepening into a steely grey. The house creaked differently now, not with loneliness, but with memory stretching its arms. I'd started painting again, something I hadn't done since college. I set up a small easel in the sunroom and let the light guide me. My first canvas was simple, The treehouse, half-shadowed, half-lit, just like the past. One morning, I got an invitation in the mail. Thick cardstock, gold trim, you are cordially invited to the Monroe Family Heritage Brunch, hosted by Vanessa, at the Foxwood Country Club. I almost laughed. A brunch. As if legacy could be polished with eggs Benedict and monogrammed napkins. I placed the card on the mantel and let it sit for days. I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, the audacity of the invitation or the fact that for once they'd included me. Emily dropped by the day before the brunch. She wore her hair in a loose braid, her eyes clearer than I'd ever seen them. "Are you going to go?" she asked, nodding toward the card. "I don't know," I said. "They invited you. They erased me for 40 years. I'm not sure eggs and mimosas change that." She nodded, quiet. "You don't have to go, but I'll be there. And if you do come, I'll save you a seat." She kissed my cheek before she left. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror longer than usual. I wore a navy dress, the same one I'd worn to the wedding. It fit differently now, not tighter, not looser, just more honest, like I had grown into it. I arrived 10 minutes late. The country club's event room buzzed with polite laughter, clinking glasses, curated floral arrangements. Vanessa stood near the fireplace, giving air kisses, posing for photos. Margaret sat in a corner seat, flanked by women in pearls, her expression as controlled as ever. Emily spotted me first, her face lit up. She stood, waved me over, and didn't hesitate to pull out the chair beside her. I sat. Conversations paused, eyes flicked toward me, but no one said anything. The kind of silence that isn't empty, but brimming, with history, with discomfort, with truth finally stepping into the room. Vanessa approached slowly, wineglass in hand. "Rachel," she said, "you look well." "I am," I replied. A beat passed. "We weren't sure you'd come." "You weren't sure I'd stay," I said calmly. "But I did." She opened her mouth, then closed it. Whatever speech she had prepared wasn't built for this version of me. The program began. Speeches, toasts, a slideshow of black and white family photos. They skipped over most of the 90s. I didn't mind, I wasn't in many of those pictures anyway. When it was Emily's turn to speak, she took the microphone with surprising ease. "This family," she began, "has been built on strength. But sometimes strength looks like silence, like service, like being the person who shows up even when no one remembers to thank them." She looked at me. "And sometimes the people who hold us up are the ones we tried hardest not to see. But I see you now. We all do. And I hope this brunch marks not just celebration, but correction." Scattered applause, tears in my eyes, not because of pain, but because of arrival. Afterward, a distant cousin approached me. "Rachel," she said gently, "I always wondered why you weren't in the photos. You were always there, weren't you?" "Yes," I said, "but now I don't need to be in their pictures." She tilted her head. "I'm in the story," I said. And that was enough. After the brunch ended, I lingered in the lobby. The crowd dispersed into small talk and photo ops, Vanessa recentering herself like a stage actress returning to her mark. I could have slipped out quietly, but something in me hesitated. I wasn't afraid, just measuring the moment. The weight of reclaiming space doesn't vanish in applause. It roots itself in something deeper, presence. Emily came over, cheeks flushed with pride. "You were incredible," she whispered. I didn't say anything. "That's exactly why." Before I could reply, Margaret approached. She walked slowly, her cane tapping softly against the tiled floor. Her eyes weren't cold, just unreadable, like always. "I suppose this is your victory lap," she said, her voice brittle. "No," I replied, "just brunch." A tight silence stretched between us. "I never hated you, Rachel," she said, Not kindly, but factually. You just weren't what I expected. I exhaled slowly. I wasn't what you wanted. She didn't deny it. You were always so quiet, she added. So easy to forget. I held her gaze. You didn't forget. You chose not to see me. That struck something. Her face flickered. For a moment I saw not the matriarch, not the critic, but the aging woman beneath it. Someone who had built her identity on control and found herself unmoored in the truth. I won't apologize, she said. I'm not asking. She nodded once, almost in relief, and turned away. As I watched her go, I felt something unexpected. Pity. Not because she was weak, but because she had lived her entire life defining power by how much silence she could impose on others. And now, her words, so carefully measured, so tightly held, had no hold over me. On the drive home, the air felt lighter. Windows down, wind combing through my hair. I took the long way, past the lake where Dad taught me how to fish, past the grocery store where I'd walked Emily in a stroller every Thursday. The town hadn't changed much, but I had. When I got home, the mailbox held a small package, no return address. Inside was a key, old, brass, familiar. A note accompanied it, written in my father's unmistakable handwriting. For the treehouse, just in case someone ever locks you out again. I laughed, a real, deep laugh. Of course he'd planned ahead. Even now, he was still leaving me breadcrumbs. That night I climbed back up to the treehouse, key in my pocket, journal in hand. The stars were out, scattered like freckles on a dark canvas. I sat on the floor, knees tucked in, and opened the journal to a fresh page. I wrote, "They tried to erase me, with silence, with omission, with carefully constructed stories that left me at the edges. But I am the margins, the binding, the hand that held the pen. They tried to edit me out, but I'm writing the ending." Later, I lit a candle and let its flicker illuminate the small space. It was a ceremony of sorts, not for closure, but for continuation, because healing isn't a chapter you finish, it's the way you write the next page. A week later, I received a photo from Emily. It was a candid, taken during the brunch, me and her standing side by side, no filters, no posing, just two women stitched together by something stronger than blood, choice. She captioned it, "The woman who raised me." I printed it, framed it, and placed it in the hallway. Across from the old family portraits that still hung untouched, not to replace them, but to correct the record, one truth at a time.